Hello everyone! Blizzcon 2023 is on the horizon. So of course, a lot of the questions right now are about where we're gonna go next, what do you hope to see for the expansion, and all that BlizzCon hype jazz. Plenty of leaks have been going around, which people should really see a doctor for. All in all, time to sit down and talk about the future of WoW. But before I can talk about the future, what I would like to see added, the story to come, I do want to talk a little bit about the game right now. Ultimately, I'm good with most settings. I just want a good game to play. And while all of this will be subjective and opinionated, at the end of the day, that's all I can really offer.
Together, we shall be Azeroth's protectors once again.
Dragonflight in general, for me, has been a lot better than Shadowlands, but I still think it has quite a long way to go to reach top expansions in my mind. Expansions like Legion, Pandaria, or Wrath of the Lich King. They made it so that I no longer feel bound to systems that I need to keep up with in order to play the game, which has been great. I've even been able to dive into a bit of PvP as the gearing was made so very easy. They've been great at keeping us up to date with their development plans, and what they announced actually comes to be. Living up to expectations created instead of overhyping it. What we got was pretty great, but I do felt like there just wasn't a lot of it, and I would love to see that improved in the future. They made it so that I don't need to be online. Now I want things to do while I am online. I saw 10-man mythic rating flyby on the Twitter. Great suggestion. I would love to see it, but personally, I'm looking more at some of the side content. Content that doesn't have a major impact on your growth, but can still be fun to dive into. They don't even have to invent new things, to be honest. You could open up the Darkmoon Fair 24/7, bring back island expeditions, garrisons, Pandaria farms, scenarios, time trials, Torghast, a Timeless Isle or Isle of Quel'Danas, the Brawlers Guild, Chromie scenario, Warlock Greenfire questline, Revion's Void scenarios. The list goes on and on. Just because some of these were not exactly great in their own time period, that doesn't mean you can't improve upon them and take them with into the future. Torghast is a great example, which was just brimming with potential during testing, could be made extremely fun by adding some old boss fights, letting people go ham with the upgrades. Just because you made it required and therefore turned it into Torghast, it doesn't mean it dropped all potential to be a fantastic system in the future. These are just examples, of course, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. More content to play through. And in the form of rewards, you could think cosmetic, right? Maybe some furniture for the garrison, or hell, add some trader attendees, or give us something to buy with achievement points. I don't really care too much about the rewards, but I just want stuff to queue up for, to dive into, to grab my friends and actually play, rather than the standard dungeons and raids. Okay, that touched a little bit on the gameplay side of things. Let us move on into something that I'm more familiar with, which is the story of Warcraft. But one does affect the other. A lot of the story in Warcraft is told through the zones, the dungeons, with a finale in the raid. With fewer bosses in between, you got less opportunities to develop and tell a story. But there's more going on in the story department, more to reflect and improve upon. Perhaps more than I can dive into right now with this video, but here are some of the major things that stand out to me, and I would love to see changed in the future. For some reason, they've managed to make it feel like we're not going anywhere, while at the same time chewing through major events without letting it have the time it needs to shine and actually make an impact. Plotlines like rebuilding tier, they've started at the beginning of the expansion, but not really gone anywhere. We're also very contained just to the Dragon Isles, not a lot of information on what's happening in the outside world. If we look at what we've done in this expansion, it seems like we just swap one thing immediately for the next. No time to wait, no time to evolve and grow, because there's the next thing. Don't pay attention to what we just did, don't ask for details, just focus on the next big shiny thing. And that's leaving us with very little impact, as well as problems that are very easily resolved. For example, Ysera has returned from the Shadowlands after a whole arc in that expansion. Being connected to the afterlife, one day they said she might soar the skies of Azeroth again, but in that moment, she was going to be stuck there for a bit. We do a time skip. How do we resolve this problem? Well, we simply have Malfurion take a nap. Nosdormu has been worrying about becoming Moruzand for a really long time. It's character defining, perhaps since the time of he became an aspect. Story-wise, it started to play a major part around Wrath, Cataclysm, that period of time. Either way, years of dread, years of worrying about what is to come. And the story, it's resolved in a dungeon. It's gotten to the point where the story is doing so many massive jumps that the audience can't really believe what they're seeing. Surely we didn't save Nosdormu, right? They wouldn't throw Murz away. Surely we didn't take care of N'Zoth and the old gods, right? He must have placed himself in the blade. Surely they wouldn't turn Sylvanas, another war chief, into the next big bad. Surely she must be scheming against the jailer instead. don't call me Shirley. I think it speaks volumes that your audience will go through anything instead of accepting the story that you're providing. Sure enough, they can always change their minds and alter the story, but as it stands right now, this is what we got. So these moments need to become actually impressive and impactful. Part of getting that done is by diving into the motivation, into the backstories, explain who they are, where they come from, where they're gonna go, and why we're supposed to care. Kurog Grimtotem and the Primalist are a great example. Kurog is described as a former apprentice of Magafa Grimtotem. Only in the dungeon journal, by the way. I don't believe that they actually have that information in the game, but regardless, Magafa is still a quite mysterious, scheming character. So what was their time like? Why is he a former apprentice? What kind of powers and tricks did he learn? Where is Magafa right now? How does she feel about the story of Dragonflight? What about the Legion Order halls with the shamans at the Earthen Ring? How did they feel about the rise of the elements? Where did the Primalists come from? How did they have the power and knowledge to liberate Razakev? This here Primalist, whose name I don't even remember, they have a Teldrassil scar on their face. Are they connected to the burning of Teldrassil? Oh, they're already taken care of while questing. Apparently these Primalists in the raid, their family, what's their origin and history, none of that is woven into the story and experience. And before we even have time to care or think about what's happening, they're swiped away. Of course, not everything is going to need a massive backstory, but it needs more than, oh yeah, and then the Primalists that were totally always there showed up. The same goes for Sarkareth and the Sundered Flame. There's a lot to be said about the Dragfear stepping away from the aspects and their original mission. Their feelings of betrayal, their time serving in Neltharion's army. Why wouldn't they be our opposition, considering what happened to them? What is their side of the story? Are we actually doing the right thing in standing up against them? Oh, was that? He's taken care of in a laboratory, which for some reason the Primal Incarnates knew about, but not the other aspects, and now we gotta move on? Oh, the other Sundered Flame now rejoined us? Okay, nice. What's gonna be next? Nosdormu faced corruption? Don't worry, we'll run a quick dungeon. Ysera needs to come back? Cool, let's Malfurion take a nap. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. I hope I made my point here. We're burning through events that don't get the time to cook, and therefore they leave little impact behind. We've gone from super vague storytelling in the Shadowlands, where we just have to imagine that there's actually a story, right? People telling us like you need to listen, but really there isn't any story to be told. Until, we read it in a book. To now blasting through stories and beats without getting any of the meat in there. There is a middle ground to be found. What I do find curious is that amongst the kind of storytelling that we have in Dragonflight, we do have gems as well. The Orc Heritage Armor questline, it throws pretty much all of the Orcish history at you and was just a feast of recognition. The Forsaken questline was also pretty great. And then the Blue Dragon storyline, for me it's some of the best questing and storytelling that they've done ever. Like ever. It calls to old stories, it builds new ones, it has impactful emotional moments and characters realistically declining to join our adventure as they've gone through enough already. I don't know who amongst the team has worked on these projects, but they should let them do a lot more because it was simply fantastic. Another thing that I would love to see them drop going into the future, perhaps make some bold statements during BlizzCon, that would be point of view storytelling. On its own, point of view storytelling is not good or bad. It very much depends on how you use it. Very similar to time gating, sometimes you'll end up with a solid Pseudomar campaign, and sometimes you'll end up with some broken Isle nonsense. A good use of point of view storytelling that can be found within Battle for the Zara lore. We reach a point where we get informed by the soldiers on what happened here, and each faction has a slightly different version. Nothing major, nothing groundbreaking, but fun enough to realize that the world of Warcraft, it's a real thing, and people react and pass on information differently. That's fine, and that works great. Applying that to every story ever conceived in your entire universe, not so much. This started with the Warcraft Chronicles, once promoted by Chris Metzen as books that were going to clean up the lore so far.
People often ask, why is lore important? The lore, the storytelling of Warcraft is something that we've really tried to work on and hone over the years as an integral part of the fantasy you're playing through. When it catches you, it's something you want to keep coming back to over and over. Warcraft Chronicle is the first in a series of books that attempts to codify and tighten up and clarify the history of Warcraft.
This was going to be their attempt at wrapping up X amount of years of storytelling where bits and pieces of information, they've been retconned, they've been changed, some of it's conflicting. These books were going to take care of that and lay a solid foundation for Warcraft upon which to build further. Go a few years into the future, and we have Steve the Newser at BlizzCon announce that the Chronicles it's actually filled with information from a point of view. More specifically, the Titan's point of view.
So does this mean Chronicle is canon?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Chronicle is something that we worked on, you know, all of us together going through the Warcraft's history. But the thing to remember about Chronicle that I want you to think about is that, you know, even any history, even something that's as encyclopedic as Chronicle, is written from a certain point of view. And if you look at the history of Azeroth that was contained in there, and even you know what it talked about in terms of the cosmos and things like that, whose point of view would that have been from? Well, that's right, the Titans' point of view, and the people who worked for the Titans, because they ordered so much of Azeroth and what it is. But there's a lot of other perspectives. If you look at the section of Chronicle that talks about the Black Empire was this huge swath of history. But the Titans only give it a few pages, you know, from that point of view in this book. So there's other things in that kind of happen behind the scenes in Chronicle or were hinted at in Chronicle that you'll find expanded as we go into the Shadowlands and explore that cosmology even more.
Very exciting.
Now I could speculate as to why they decided to do this, but it really doesn't matter. The results are still the same. What we thought we knew about the story is now from a point of view. If you want to bring out these books and look up the history of the Black Empire, for example, you now got to deal with, oh yeah, but this is actually just told from the Titans' point of view. They could have lied, they could all be wrong. The whole world might not have been infected with the old gods' void and corruption. Perhaps it was filled with rainbows and sunshine. It's an extreme example, of course, but the point stands. I would honestly love if you could go up on stage this year and just say, you know what? Forget what I said back then. Chronicles are fully canon again. They didn't stop there though. After turning the foundation of the universe into wobbling pudding, they decided to then expand upon it. Instead of what we knew, they now added stuff like the first ones, right? New mythos to the origin of the Warcraft universe. And you know what? That is a good thing. Warcraft needs more sources and stories to draw upon than what was already been established. Personally, I don't feel like going for just, oh yeah, there's more Titans out there, and oh yeah, they were actually the first ones instead of, you know, the Titans. I don't think that's exciting, but that's personal when it comes to the themes. But the idea of coming up new stuff is greatly needed. But again, most of the information provided, so stuff on the first ones, the origin of the cosmos, eternal ones, Zerus, pretty much what we learned about the Shadowlands, it once again comes from a point of view. A broker has written down their research in the Grimoire of the Shadowlands. At least this one was announced being from a point of view, so at least you knew what you're gonna buy. Sadly, this point of view storytelling, like the Jailer's Warning, it did not stay in the Shadowlands. It's part of Dragonflight as well, but at least time it's not world-altering, right? The problem is that while it's fun to speculate, and retcons will always be part of an evolving universe, turning your world knowledge into a point of view, it devalues everything you said and everything you're going to say. You might be able to sell a couple of extra copies of books with new information that's totally legit for a year or two. You might be able to freely alter the lore and write it off as, oh yeah, that was actually just a point of view though. This new story, that's totally the truth. This is totally what we're going with. The overall score at the end of the day is that people have nothing to go on, and therefore they lose interest. If nothing is solid, then nothing matters. Instead, you gotta be brave enough to actually tell a story and stand by it. Have a foundation, which you then carefully build upon. Have a plan in mind. Have stories that make sense compared to your characters. And then you know where you want to go. And of course, if changes are needed somewhere down the line, you can do it with care, instead of these broad strokes. As I said, there's definitely been improvements compared to the Shadowlands, but there's still a way to go. Who knows? Perhaps with the return of Madsen, perhaps with Microsoft buying them up, we will see some changes at some point. Let's all embrace the BlizzCon hype and hope for the best. Now, I was planning to do a separate dedicated video on some of the leaks and story plots they could dive into, or what I want to see. But I think I can manage it in this one. So I've seen leaks fly by about the dwarves, as they mentioned in the in-game books. There's the other side of Azeroth, potentially being within Azeroth itself. If I look at what's going on right now, then we're going to take care of Virak, right? Potentially have a Viranov sacrifice and Alexstrasza stand up against the will of Tyr and the Titans. That then leaves Iridikron out and about, and he wants a word with those Titans. Apparently Azeroth is healing. That's what caused the elements to rise up. And then there is Zalotov. Is she still aligned with the will of the Void, or is she now drawing her own plans? Who knows? Now, I would love to see Azeroth wake up. I wanted this backdoor battle for Azeroth, right? Wake up, the battle for Azeroth becoming first, a battle between the Alliance and the Horde for dominance of the world, then for the fate of the world as we fought against outside forces, and then Azeroth itself waking up. A battle literally with Azeroth, her yoinking that sword out of the back and go at war. I would have loved to have seen it. Now she's cleansed, now she's healing. Could it be that she is going to stand with the Titans against Iridikron and the Will of Zoltov? That in turn could point our gaze to a portion of the Warcraft universe that I would love to explore. Space, or as Warcraft calls it, the Great Dark Beyond. We know of a couple of planets out there. Draenor or Argus, they're probably the most familiar, but there are more planets out there. We've gotten hints at more races being empowered by Elune and become the Night Warrior. We've read archives on how other races stood up against the Might of Sargeras and the Burning Legion. Imagine hopping on a spaceship and exploring those worlds for ourselves. The different cultures, planets, races, classes, technology unheard of before. What has life been like for those not bound to Azeroth in the millennia of the Legion scouting the universe in search of a corrupted world? And speaking of the Legion, what are the demons up to now that Sargeras is no longer leading them as he did before? He's not even fighting them anymore. Demons can return to what they did at the very beginning. Are they just going to go back to corrupting civilizations, or is there more to them? Could we see a Sire Denethrius and the Dreadlords holding the ranks together? Old gods have infected more planets than just Azeroth. What kind of empires did they give birth to on those planets? Point being, there's a lot of unknown territory to be explored out there, and I would love to see it. This in turn can flow into domains like the Void Lords, where the madness and corruption of the old gods originates from. We could go to a Titan land, see where the domain of Order comes from, the Naru and the Light, of course, like all the cosmic domains, they have some place in the universe. We could dive into that, similar to how we're getting a taste of the Emerald Dream right now. Now, I know that a lot prefer the grounded feeling of staying on Azeroth, and I do believe that a world revamp to get the world out of the Cataclysm periods is definitely needed and a good thing. But I would just love, I would love to go into Great Dark Beyond, to just hop from planet to planet, find out what is out there. Personal taste, though. As I said, I'm excited to see what they've been cooking up and what the future's going to bring. For me, this is always the best period of time, where it's all exciting and new, shiny, and the future is still unknown. By all means, let me know what you're thinking of in the comments down below. And until next time, see ya!